Welcome, sweethearts, to What the Hype, where this week we're talking about the latest entry in Suzanne Collins' World of the Hunger Games, the novel Sunrise on the Reaping, which just came out last week on March 18th. Before we get started, make sure you're following us on all of our social media sites and also on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Just search for What the Hype podcast, and don't forget that you can see full video episodes over on YouTube as well. And if you're a Hunger Games fan, make sure that you don't miss our last 2 episodes of this podcast, where the first discussed the Hunger Games series on the whole, as well as the rise in popularity of dystopian fiction, and also our second episode where we kind of had a little bit more fun and talked about how we thought we would realistically fare in the Hunger Games if we were reaped. And we also did a little bit of fan casting for the upcoming movie based on Sunrise on the Reaping. So it was a really fun episode overall.
Stone doesn't break.
I'm still saying that to myself, going, man, that's a good line.
Wow, that was good.
Andrew's going to get all the sponsors. And speaking of Andrew and Eric are back this week as well, along with myself, Pam. And we're really excited to talk about this book because we all finished reading it, right?
Yeah. I got to pat myself on the back. I normally don't read books that quick, but I did read it in like 5 or 6 days. Yeah.
Wow.
It helps that it was really good, and I'll explain further in a moment.
And so much shorter than Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. When I picked it up at the store, I was like, this is it. Like, I thought it was going to be so much longer. Well, this is probably a good time also to give you guys a little bit of a spoiler warning. Since we have all finished the book, we're going to just be no holds barred on this episode. So just keep that in mind if you want to keep listening. It's going to be full of spoilers from start to finish. So if you haven't finished Sunrise on the Reaping, just hit pause and come back and join us when you finished the book.
President Snow dies.
Yes.
That was very unexpected, by the way. Yeah, very unexpected.
Very, very.
I wonder by what means he will come back.
That's been ruling tyrannically in Katniss's years. So for anybody that forgot for whatever reason, we do want to remind you that this book is set 24 years before Katniss's Hunger Games, and it follows Haymitch's story. Haymitch was actually reaped at 16 years old, also obviously from District 12, like Katniss. And it was really interesting to kind of see a version of him that existed before he'd been jilted and jaded. But before we get into that, I wanted to kick things off by asking you both what you thought about the book overall. Do you guys want to give your quick little reviews before we dive into the nitty gritty?
Yeah, I loved the book, and I also couldn't help but feeling last week when it came out, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is sort of the perfect moment in American politics to read this sort of book. It felt like it was hitting on all cylinders, especially with themes of propaganda, and just overt control, government overreach, these things that, of course, the other books all had. Nevertheless felt like they were meant to be consumed now. And I can't remember having that sensation before while reading a Hunger Games book. So that really stood out to me. And I really just loved Suzanne Collins. I think it's clear has a gift for character and a gift for story. And, the fact that we were able to pretty quickly go through this and enjoy it just speaks volumes.
Yeah, I was really impressed by how Suzanne Collins built on Haymitch's story in a way that didn't disrupt what we knew about him from the Hunger Games trilogy, and also added a lot about other characters as well, who we will discuss during today's episode. It reminds me, and I think Eric will appreciate this reference, of the Breaking Bad prequel series Better Call Saul, which added a lot of good backstory to the characters we knew from Breaking Bad. And when you went back and rewatched Breaking Bad after watching Better Call Saul, you could watch a lot of these characters develop with a lot more good information in mind. It kind of changes how you feel about these characters. So it just built on the existing trilogy in a really nice way that adds a lot if you were to go back and reread The Hunger Games. And I've seen some reviews of this book calling it the best in the series so far, which I think is a bold claim, but I understand what people are thinking, because while this is a prequel, we are 5 books now into this series, and as you learn more about this world and these characters, I think even just going backwards in the timeline can really just impact you in different ways. Five books in. I've also noted that it seems like Suzanne Collins is getting better as a writer, and I think I agree with that. I haven't read the original Hunger Games trilogy in a while, but the writing in this is excellent.
I can definitely see. I had the kind of the idea while reading this. Oh, she could do all 74 years of Hunger Games, and they would all seem different and all like be interesting and have something worthwhile to contribute. And that's not the feeling you get if you're reading a book where like it's a slog and it's repetitive and it's not well done and you have no buy-in. So that's all I'll say as far as I definitely I come away from this one, our 4th, I think, Hunger Games that we read through, and wanting more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Eric, because I totally agree. I was the most hesitant to read this book because it does feel like it would be really easy to fall into a repetitive pattern. And just know you're going to get your bag at the end, right? The Hunger Games is a super successful franchise. It's also like there's a resurgence in popularity and desire for more stories from here. She could have phoned it in so hard, but the fact that she was able to bring us back into the fold of the games and it felt fresh and it felt new. And it felt like, to Andrew's point, that it was really contributing to fleshing out this world and giving us another piece of the puzzle is a testament to the fact that, she has really good story on her hands. And, it doesn't feel like she just was pandering. I know that was the concern of a lot of the fan base, like, is giving us Haymitch's Hunger Games just pandering to fans because he is a fan favorite, and I think the answer to that now is no. It's also just really impressive that, like, I know I was glued to my book as soon as I started reading, because we already know how Haymitch's games end down to like the final kill. Like that is part of the original trilogy's lore.
And what happens after to him.
Right. Exactly. So the fact that it was a compelling enough story for us to feel like we were experiencing things for the first time, even if we knew part of like the roadmap ahead, is really impressive.
Yeah, agreed. And that I share those feelings as well, that going into this, I was kind of dreading doing this whole reaping, training, interviews, Hunger Games tournament format for a 4th time. And as we'll get into in a few minutes, I was very pleasantly surprised by how fresh Suzanne Collins kept it. There are some big surprises that kept it compelling despite doing this for a 4th time. And I was like, okay, let's go. This is not going how the other ones did. And that's interesting. It's expanding the world in really cool ways. And we're learning more about Haymitch that we never knew. Love it.
Yeah, what I loved about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was that it was early enough in the games that they were different enough, right? So it was like, what role did the mentors have, or who are the mentors other the students? And there weren't really mutts used in the stadium yet, and that was all kind of like still to be figured out. The games had to still figure out what they were going to be. And when you get to the original Hunger Games trilogy, the 74th and 75th, it's a well-oiled machine and there's nothing they can't throw at you and everything's very high concept. So seeing something in the middle and be in the middle of that. And also these are the years where the characters that we're familiar with from the original trilogy, these are some of the years in which they would have completed their various Hunger Games, is actually a really titillating premise. It's not just Haymitch, it's the other characters that are also here as well. Just to mention one, Wirus won last year's game. So it's incredibly current. It feels like you're in the middle of the story, and that's kind of the most exciting place to kind of be put.
Well, we're going to get into all of that and much more in a minute, but first we're going to take a break to pay the bills, and we'll be right back to dive fully into this wonderful book that we've all enjoyed.
Speaking of sponsors.
All right. right. Well, it's always best to start at the beginning. So let's kick things off by talking about a little bit about what happens before the games are even afoot. Obviously, we're introduced to a 16-year-old Haymitch right off the bat when the book starts. He's a pretty good kid and, a good son, has a good relationship with his mom and his little brother. I think we're already kind of starting to see a few little parallels here between him and Katniss. And also, like, the most radical thing about him is that he has a side hustle distilling spirits with a bootlegger.
But he doesn't drink any of that. I wondered when the alcohol would come in, but no, he's just outside of town helping others brew and doing odd jobs. Kind of
this raised a flag myself because obviously he's a big drinker in the Hunger Games trilogy. So seeing that, I was like, okay, well, we're probably going to learn in this book what led him to drink. It could have been assumed, of course, going through the Hunger Games itself could lead him to that, but obviously there's a lot more that affected him and impacted that caused him to develop a drinking problem.
Yeah, but you meet him in the beginning of the book and he's like, yeah, I don't drink.
Yeah, he's sober.
Like, oh, that's so quaint. It reminds me of 16-year-old me. I don't drink. Just wait, kid. Wait until you've seen the world. Then you're going to...
Wait until you've been through a Hunger Games tournament.
Oh,
that's
man.
probably why he's a good assistant, too.
Yeah.
Because, and also he doesn't have to worry about throwing his money away on booze or
That's right.
taking his cut in alcohol, basically. So he's also completely in love with his girlfriend, Lenore Dove, who is Covey. And this is her first callback to Songbirds and Snakes. Lucy Gray Baird was Covey as well. They're kind of like this troupe of artists, and they live out mostly in the forest in Songbirds and Snakes. But after the first uprising, they've been constrained to District 12. So whereas they were kind of a nomadic people before, they've been sequestered there. And the funny part about Lenore Dove is that it is mentioned just very briefly that her surname is actually Baird. So she is a direct descendant in some way of Lucy Gray.
We were making predictions a couple of weeks ago about whether or not this book would tie much into Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I was pleasantly surprised to see that it did tie in so quickly to that prequel. And I love that Suzanne Collins is doing that. It's really encouraging you to make sure you read all of the prequels. I'm optimistic now there's going to be more, but if this is her ultimate game plan to keep releasing additional prequels or maybe sequels to the Hunger Games and tie them all together, that's cool as hell.
Yeah. It also makes sense why she needed to give us Songbirds and Snakes first.
That makes a lot of sense. It would be harder to explain kind of without having this touch point. I will say also that I was equally pleased with how this book really straddles the two other books, Songbirds and Snakes, and then the original Hunger Games or that trilogy. And definitely through Lucy Gray Baird, these were essentially the three tributes from District 12. Lucy Gray Baird, Haymitch, and Katniss. And Peeta, of course, who we cannot discredit. But, these were the three eras in which, and they serve as bookends, in a really interesting way. For progress, and it can't be a coincidence, but it's interesting that each time we have a games, the main character is from this district that really doesn't get represented a lot, or they go in and they're not successful in the Hunger Games.
Yeah, Finnick is a fan favorite character, of course, and people are begging Suzanne Collins to do
his games.
A book focused on him. He is from District 4. So if we do get that, then we will finally break free of all this District 12 coverage.
Yes.
You're just I'm ready to hit up the carear districts.
The career districts would be a really interesting insight. Yeah. I mean, we got some of that. We really got a lot of, we'll talk about it later, but Mags is from District 4.
Well, let's keep things rolling here and talk about the reaping. This was definitely the first big plot twist that we were served up. This year is a little bit of a treat for the Quarter Quell. The capital has decreed that twice as many tributes will be reaped from each district. 2 boys and 2 girls. I'm sure we were all holding our breaths when they were calling out the names. And surprisingly, Haymitch doesn't even get called. So he's actually not initially reaped, and he ends up getting hand selected because he's trying to protect Lenore Dove from the peacekeepers. There's a boy that does get reaped. He tries to run away. He gets shot, and they shut down the broadcast. This is the first time we learn that there's a delay in the broadcasting system, but it makes sense because the Capitol is controlling everything. So like I was reading this thinking like, of course there would be a delay.
Right.
Like how many times must this have happened? And that's kind of like the thought that Haymitch has as well. So what did you all think about all of this as it was happening?
It's like starting a timer when you hear there's 5 minutes and then everything in the book is more tense because you're like, oh, how will they, like, you're not rooting for the Capitol people, but you're like, how will they swing this? Because a boy has just had his head like hit with a bullet and there's all this chaos. His mother's cradling him, like she's naturally emotional. Not only that, but all the townspeople, this is one of their citizens. Like you just wonder how the Capitol's going to do it, and learning that they sort of, barely do, but that unfortunately that's how Haymitch gets involved. I just appreciate the notes that were similar about how the districts react to Capitol people, the peacekeepers, how they resent them, but are kind of powerless to resist. But then on the other hand, just how each of the tributes kind of looks at their fate and things.
Again, like I was saying a few minutes ago, it was a refreshing surprise to learn that Haymitch wasn't initially reaped and then seeing what goes down. But the other heartbreaking angle here was that he was actually so close to not having to participate at all.
I know. He
this
could
is
have
something
just
we
hung
never
out.
knew.
Could have just hung out with Lenore
He
Dove.
thought he was safe. He thought his girl was safe.
Could have been
some
sober
geese.
maybe for the rest of his life.
Right.
Yeah. But the hands of fate.
Mm-hmm.
Also carefully orchestrated. I mean, partially hands of fate, but by a young Plutarch Heavensby, who is not a game maker. He's actually at this point in the story a cameraman, and he's in charge of getting all this footage used to promote the Hunger Games. So, I mean, we knew going into this book that one of the main themes that Suzanne was going to be exploring is that of propaganda. She really emphasized that when she put out the blurb for this book. But I wanted to ask you all if you were surprised that this manifested right away with, Plutarch trying to orchestrate these reaction shots from the Abernathys and also the McCoys. Luella McCoy is the youngest that's reaped from District 12 for anyone who doesn't remember.
I was giddy about this. I was giddy when his first name is first dropped, Plutarch. Oh, wait, here we go. And seeing him, I mean, it's horrible getting all these reaction shots and having to like put these people through this. But I think from minute one, it's clear that what he's actually doing is incredibly subtle. And the fact that he's able to, by doing all these shots, give Haymitch an unexpected amount of time with his family still, because everyone's being put on the train. All of these, actions of his have both an explanation that the Capitol would like and the sort of reality or consequence that our heroes would like. And everything he does, the entire book is that way. And it's really masterful. And so I was loving every minute of it.
Yeah, it's crazy to see how controlled he is even at such a young age, to your point, Eric, because we obviously get a lot of that when we initially meet him as part of Katniss's story. But to see that he's operating in that same vein still, even as a younger person in this story is crazy. Like you automatically know exactly who he is, And
there's a long history now that's been established through, in Songbirds and Snakes, there was Heavensby Hall. They're the local rich family. You now know so much more about kind of what Plutarch is born into that I think it also works for the types of conversations that he tries to have with Haymitch about, don't think just because I'm rich that I don't also want freedom. For him to realize that the world is horrible, but also be a force acting for good in the middle of it is really bold, really brave. And we know, especially in the movie versions of the trilogy, where Philip Seymour Hoffman is shown in the role, Snow is consulting him with how to handle the whole Mockingjay situation. He's like a close personal confidant. We remember what happened to Seneca Crane, the last game maker that got on the wrong side of Snow. But the role that Plutarch has to play from the later games, but then also as far back as now, is incredibly subtle. And it's so fun to read about. I was blown away.
Yeah. I think a very interesting element here is how you do learn, Eric, you mentioned the comment that Plutarch offers to Haymitch. He says he doesn't feel free. Just because I live in the capital doesn't mean I feel free. I would love to see now some backstory on Plutarch. Okay, he's not happy in the capital. He doesn't like all the control that the capital has. But there's got to be more there. And I don't know if we need a whole standalone book covering Plutarch, but maybe Suzanne Collins could do like a series of short stories all wrapped up in one book, covering some characters
really cool.
like Mags, Plutarch, other characters we know and love. Just to continue building on this world, because she keeps proving that she has compelling stories for a lot of different characters, and fans are clearly willing to eat it all up.
So after the reaping, we're swiftly on our way en route to the capital. And once we're on the train and the peacekeepers and Plutarch have kind of decreed that Haymitch has settled down enough to be like brought out from containment, we get really introduced to the other 3 District 12 tributes. So the tributes are Luella McCoy, who again is the youngest tribute, and Haymitch already has a pretty good relationship with her from the start, kind of sees her as a little sister, sort of. There's also Wyatt, who is described as a booker boy. So his family's in the business of taking bets on the games, and he's an odds maker. And
pretty
then there's
cool.
then there's Maisley Donner, and she's a town girl. She's kind of like PETA. She's like a little bit more well off. She's not from the theme, and she really shows it right away. So were there any standouts here for you all that kind of piqued your interest from the get-go as far as like this little crew is concerned?
Well, each of these characters was unique compared to Haymitch, and Maisley did not have a good relationship with Haymitch. And then, of course, it takes time for Haymitch to come around on Wyatt as well. And then, as you mentioned, Pam, he was closest to Luella, who, of course, dies pretty quickly. So what I liked about these 3 characters is they all had a different relationship with Haymitch, but ultimately, by the end, he wanted to have a better relationship with all 3 of them. And so watching those arcs develop was compelling.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, you mentioned Luella's death. I'm so glad you did, because once they get to the capital, she really isn't long for this world. And it's really tragic the way this happens. Basically, the careers are all, taking part in the grand entrance parade. And there's a commotion with the carriages, and Haymitch thinks he's protected Luella from the crash. It turns out he hasn't, and she dies on the spot. And he decides that he's going to make sure that her death means something. So he steals her body away from the peacekeepers and makes a run for it and lays her body at President Snow's feet. And the idea here is that he's making him own this death.
What was he doing? Where you guys were reading this, what did, like, we know this isn't going to end. We already knew it was going to end well. It's not going to. What are you thinking?
That's why I'm sighing. I'm just like, come on, Haymitch. I mean, I guess on one hand, he feels like at this stage he has nothing to lose because he will probably be dying
He's sentenced for death.
Yeah. But on the other hand, there is still a chance you could make it through this. And think about your family, too. Snow could take action on your family, even if you die during the games, as he ends up doing. So I just, this was tough to watch, but like I was saying earlier, this was a pleasant surprise. It's something different. It wasn't just another tournament. Haymitch was going buck wild.
From minute one.
Yeah. He was the martyr that Katniss did not want to be. Like Katniss, every like spark of like the beginnings of an uprising for her happened by accident.
That's hilarious.
And he's like, no.
Yeah.
He's going balls to the wall. He's like, I'm not going to let them like use my death as a means for their own propaganda. So it's kind of insane that this switch flips inside of him so quickly. And I do think part of it can be attributed to his he talks a lot about how his dad had always like kind of said like, don't let them like paint your portrait or something like that, or like don't like remember, don't let them own you. And like obviously Lenore Dove is also very anti-capital and is protesting in her own right. So I just kind of feel like maybe he was predisposed to behave this way, but it is very reckless, to Andrew's point, knowing that the capital could so easily punish people that you love.
There's been a lot in the news in the real world lately about obeying in advance. Haymitch does not do that.
Well, and he frequently brings up creating his own poster. This was a poster moment for him. We've been talking about propaganda today too. He's creating his own propaganda. He wants to be instilled in Panem history.
Right. So after this, we kind of spend quite a bit of time in this prep training period. This actually took up a lot more of the book than I thought it was going to, but I wasn't necessarily bored reading through this particular portion of the story. It just felt like it was like a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but maybe it's because, I haven't read the original books in a while, but the movies gloss over this period fairly quickly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And this is a good, like long 2 weeks that they're kind of getting ready.
Yeah, I agree. I think the reason, though, is because this is where the central plot really comes from. This is where Haymitch receives his mission. The mission that he goes out of his way his entire Hunger Games to complete, the mission of break the arena, that is given to him day one of training from Beatty, and the kind of information that he gets, like everything that Haymitch's trajectory has in store for it comes from sort of this 2-week period where he's not sure if he can trust Plutarch, not sure who he can trust, but the alliances have to be made. He has to make a decision. And so I was actually surprised because not only is it so pleasant to see these familiar characters, but to learn that there's actually a plot deliberately to break the arena is the plot. 25 years before they actually fully succeed and do that.
Pretty damn cool.
Yeah, this is like a prequel, as much as it is the middle ground of all the books. It feels like a direct prequel to Catching Fire, which is like they have the same idea in mind in Catching Fire going into the arena. Katniss does not know about it, but it's the same thing in mind, but they succeed there, whereas here they get most of the way.
Yeah. And again, this is something you go back and read the original trilogy and you learn about Plutarch and you're like, oh my God, having read Sunrise on the Reaping, I now know he's been at this for a really long time.
Yeah.
And then this beautiful payoff once you get to the end of this book, the epilogue, where you see Haymitch is relieved that he finally carried out the mission with the help of Katniss, of course, that he set out on 25 years ago. It's crazy.
It's sobering too, not for Haymitch, but I'm sure for us too, that this kind of movement, if at first you don't succeed, try again, but like seeing how long it takes to actually be able to pull something of this magnitude off.
Yeah.
Like Plutarch, especially, and Haymitch, like, and every Mags, Beatty, Wyrus, all of them were working at that for a very long time.
Right. And I think that's such a sobering truth that we can apply to the real world, because obviously we all want change to happen faster. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we do have to remember that slow progress towards a means of a better end is better than no progress at all. And the fact that this entire plan that they had took 25 extra years, and Lord knows how long it had been going before even Haymitch got involved, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Is a testament to that sometimes it takes a while for change to really take hold.
This is why I think this book is written so beautifully, because 10 pages in, we're hearing from Lenore Dove. You can't count on things happening tomorrow just because they happened in the past. It's faulty logic. She believes that change is possible, whereas Haymitch can't believe that. And by the end of this book, Haymitch is able to create change. Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
It's such a good, it's absolutely a good arc. And for how much time the book spends in like this year of the Hunger Games, you really get to appreciate all the little intricacies of where everyone is at. Like the capital is really familiar. A lot of the like Snow's responses are cryptic as ever, exciting as ever, but like you know where he's at. But what you don't know is sort of the birth of the resistance. Why is Beatty in the game? And now he has more of a reason than ever to be committed after what they do to his son this year. And so seeing everyone's buy-in is very exciting too, and was very thrilling to read.
Yeah. So we already talked a bit about Beatty, Plutarch, and obviously Beatty's son, Ampert, a little bit towards the end there. But I wanted to make sure that we didn't forget that some of the other bigger names that we do see as part of this entire montage in the training facility include a younger Mags and also Wyrus, which I think Eric brought up had just won the year before.
In a really cool way.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm saying. Like, if she wants to write anyone we know's Hunger Games, I'll read it. That's totally cool.
That might be a good short story. It might get a little boring to have her sitting on a rock.
Well, right. No, like, so it's this arena, there's all these mirrors, and it's literally at the point where it's so good at being reflective that they can't even get tributes, gifts, like, to her. And she just outlasts everybody, but like doesn't kill anyone. And because nobody can find her, they can see her, but they can't find her. What a cool. And when asked about it, she says something like, I followed the light beams or something ridiculous. But the idea that year, it wasn't about the careers, that year, it's like that arena is tailor fit to somebody who is like just capable of deducing the thing that she was able to do. No matter what, you're going to have one survivor. But the way that that it was her is really immensely satisfying. So short story, sure, but I want to hear more about other years.
And it was also cool to see. I mean, like obviously by the time we meet Mags, Wyrus, and also Beatty, first of all, Wyrus and Beatty are referred to, what is it, nuts and bolts, because they've gone mad. Right. And then Mags is mute, and we do eventually learn that Mags and Wyrus were tortured as a result of what happens in Haymitch's games. Mm-hmm. And his insolence and, whatever else they accused him of. So that's a heavy burden for them to bury. But it was really interesting to see, to actually get to hear from them in a way, like in a cognizant way that we hadn't before.
Huge.
Definitely. Again, fan favorite characters. Mags is a fan favorite character for sure. I did think these two could have gotten a little more attention and development in this book. If I were to offer one complaint, that's the thing that's jumping out to me most. I was very excited to see Mags in particular introduced, and then we didn't really get much from her. I guess one of the big takeaways about Mags was that she is willing to be a mentor for districts that aren't her own. So that was a nice bit of character development, and she was willing to step up basically last minute. But other than that, we could have gotten more there, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's because District 4 already has so many victors that they spill over and they'll do districts that aren't their own. But I agree, for the co-mentors of Haymitch, Wyrus and Mags, we really don't see too much of them because Haymitch is busy getting called over to Plutarch's house and working with Beatty and, kind of doing his thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, we'd be remiss if we did not mention Effie Trinket, Queen Effie.
A little bit of a shout out there.
Yeah. I mean, she comes in, turns out that her sister's part of Haymitch's glam team, and she comes in to save the day when the District 12 stylist just decides not to show up, and she comes to dress them all. And I thought that this was such an interesting tie-in because Haymitch is Effie's first tribute, and Katniss ends up being her last. And I don't think I ever thought that they were going to entwine her and Haymitch's story so beautifully as part of this entire, the entire history of the Hunger Games.
I agree.
I think that was really lovely.
Really cool. Yeah. I didn't really think about the bookends, but that's a great call out.
Mm-hmm. And you can tell too that she genuinely gets emotional when she's sending him up through the tunnel.
Yeah. And to see that over time will probably dull, especially if you're in charge of District 12 and they just keep dying for 25 years, until you get to the point where Katniss and Peeta enter the stadium. But what I like about their relationship is when Haymitch kind of pushes everyone away and descends into, alcoholism and stuff, she'll still have that soft spot for him because she understands why and she understands how it all happened.
Yeah, they're like tied together forever after that point. And so it is like, I mean, it would also be fascinating to hear from her because she would have seen him before he completely changed. And then she would have just seen how far he spiraled after. And it's understandable that she would be so frustrated with him by the time we meet them with Katniss. We talked a little bit about Haymitch's actions at the parade. This comes back to haunt him in a huge way when he comes face to face with Snow for the second time. And Snow personally presents him with a Luella lookalike. This I never saw coming. And I wanted to ask you both if you thought that this was like the cruelest thing that's ever been done at the behest of the Capitol, because it's just this other little girl they've put in her body.
To date, maybe it was. Yeah. But by the end of the book, I just, with Haymitch's home being purposely set on fire and his mom and brother being killed, there's some competition in this book. But yeah, this was really bad. And the unfortunate angle about this is that we see Lulu throughout much of this book, and it's hard as a reader to see her suffering like this. And it's really hard for Haymitch too. And Haymitch, over the course of this book, is also thinking about her real family. Do they recognize this person who's been transformed, if the family is even alive?
It definitely, I love that that's a mystery, and it's an open question. Like Haymitch wonders several times if anyone from 11, where they figure out that she's probably from, recognizes her. But yeah, for me, it not only works because it's creepy as hell, but I saw it as like a prelude to what they end up doing with Peeta when they capture Peeta at the end of Catching Fire and brainwash him and stuff. You see the way that he struggles against like realizing what's real, what's not real, et cetera, et cetera. And so seeing that either technology or at least that will of the Capitol that they have to do something completely inappropriate and terrifying with free will, but like de-aged 24 years and figure out this is what they're doing this year to essentially, again, keep the truth from the public that one of the tributes died before the arena, is really wild. So I was really getting a kick out of it, especially seeing how all the tributes then from District 12 still form a relationship with Lulu, and try and protect her, because they are ultimately all in this together still, even though she might be like a spy.
Well, on that note, it's time for us to take another little break. We've got to rest up before we head into the games, but we'll be right back with more of our discussion on Sunrise on the Reaping. All right, so let's get into the actual games themselves. And I guess to kick things off, we should talk about the arena, because obviously the arena is always different every year, right? This year it is deceptively tranquil. There's a pleasant meadow with lovely skies, lots of flowers. Haymitch even talks about how like everything even smells so lush. It's disorienting. There's also all this running water and almost like too much food, like natural food, from fruit to eggs and nests. And it turns out that none of it is safe. And Haymitch learns this the hard way. He's drinking water from the river, and he looks over and he sees that a rabbit is also drinking water, and the rabbit drops dead. And that's when he realizes that everything is poisonous. And the only reason he survives is because he's managed to snatch up a backpack from the cornucopia, and there are charcoal tablets inside. And so that helps him throw up the poison. And he realizes that this big heavy bag that's been full of food is actually going to be his only source of sustenance for the entire time he's in there.
Yeah, the design of this arena might suggest that the Capitol is trying to tell participants and viewers that nothing is as it seems, I guess. Don't grow comfortable just because we have this lush arena for you with crystal clear streams that you can pull water out of. And I guess it kind of ties into the theme of propaganda throughout this book too, right?
Yeah.
Misleading.
So true.
What's really going on? What does the public see? They only see what they are shown. Again, when I think at the very end, when they're leaving the arena, there's like a zoom out and they see that it's shaped like an eye.
Yeah.
And there's like a pupil
that was
and a
crazy.
Capital's
So Big
watching
Brother.
you.
which is wild.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, you definitely, you don't get that and can't discern that from like during, but looking back on it, it's like, again, like it is all about what you see. You cannot believe what you see. Who's watching, who's being watched is really interesting. You know, some game maker had a kick out of like that.
Oh,
designing
I shot
that
it.
Just
layout.
like the
An
clock.
eyeball.
An eye. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I got a kick out of it. I mean, the high watermark, they had to impress me because Catching Fire's clock arena blows my damn mind. I'm so happy with that guy. When I was reading Catching Fire, I was like, this is the best thing I've ever read. It was just really that cool. So my expectations were very high. And this one's a pretty good arena. I gotta say, as far as like during the arena, if I could lodge like a slight complaint about the plot of the book, it is that Haymitch is very distracted by his mission. It's a very useful mission, but he misses most of the games and most of like the confrontation because he is off trying to figure out how he can get to like sub-level A. And I don't hate it, but at the same time, it did feel kind of almost isolating. I know in order to survive to the end, you kind of need a day or two to like be away from all the badness and killing. But how did you guys feel? Was it kind of like disappointing to you, or do you wish that there had been, I think, a little bit more interaction on the whole throughout the games for Haymitch with others?
I thought his isolation was a good theme because it was troubling him that he did have to break off from the rest of what's the alliance? Newcomers to help Plutarch and BT with this mission. So I think that was just an important part of the plot line. And I was okay with it. And ultimately he does team up with people once we get down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, I think that I think it just would have gotten way too complicated to try and write a group dynamic with that many people. So from a purely technical standpoint, it makes sense. And I think that the way that Suzanne Collins kind of combats this is that as certain members of his alliance find him, they all reach gruesome, inevitable ends. And it's like, so you still get like, I guess like the action of the Hunger Games,
it's like he was there with them the whole time.
But it also like it slowly starts to build on this idea that really gets put into perspective at the end of the book, which is that Haymitch is never allowed to get close to anyone ever again because everyone he does get close to dies, and that narrative starts manifesting as early as in the arena.
Oh, that's like he'll be alone forever. And always alone. Yeah, that's so good. So
I mean, he cares for even like Lulu, who's not even Luella. He grows to care for her,
right?
And he has to like it's a mercy killing, right? But
so
it still
like
hurts.
It's like you never leave the games. This is a theme in all the books.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, like that, and like with Ampert too, and that churned my stomach with the squirrels, and then like all that was left was his bones.
That was particularly bad. The beheading was bad. The ladybugs that like blow skin off of you.
Oh, that sounded
yeah. Like this is sick, twisted mind of Suzanne.
What is wrong with you, Suzanne Collins?
Yeah. So and then like Maisley Donner too. I think that like you're right. You guys were right in saying that he starts off not liking her, but the fact that he grows to see her as a sister in the end is just really lovely. And it's just, like she's such a strong character too. It's too bad that,
I was very impressed.
And she also like dies with like on her own terms kind of. And I think that's all she wanted. So
that's important when you're a tribute. Yeah.
So ultimately Haymitch ends up winning after a showdown with the District 2 tribute named Silka, and what ends up happening is Haymitch discovers this force field that rebounds anything that goes beyond it, and she throws her axe at him and he ducks, and then the axe boomerangs back and kills her instead, which is insane.
It's insane, insanely cool. This is going to be a great moment in the movie, I think. And I have to admit, I totally forgot that Haymitch had actually told Katniss and Peeta this in Catching Fire.
Oh, yeah.
So I realized this earlier today, and I was pleasantly surprised. But it's cool getting that payoff. You know, Catching Fire, the book, came out in 2000 and loading
9?
The Google page. I think it's 9. Yeah.
I think it's like 8, 9, and 10, maybe.
Of course, Google's not loading. Yeah, somewhere around there. So to finally, 2009. So to finally get the story in detail in this book, pretty cool. 16-year wait for that.
Yeah, but I'm also excited there was so much else going on, right? Like the reason Haymitch discovers the force field is because he's trying to get at the generator because he blew up the tank of water, but it didn't quite get the whole arena flooded. It like broke the brain, but there's still some power, et cetera, et cetera. Like I find all of that to be pretty fascinating. I did have a question about like what the water tank was supposed to be used for in the arena, because on the one hand, I thought it was said that like, if it blows, they can all drown, but that like didn't happen. So the water tank like didn't end up making it like much into the arena in a way that I thought it might.
Right. Well, they were hoping it definitely would. And there was like this bladder analogy, go for this and you'll blow up the bladder, something something with physics here where like you break it open and then the water fills up. I think to answer your question, Eric, it's just that the Capitol was able to get the leak under control before it got really bad. That was my impression. I don't know. Pam, did you have a different takeaway from this?
Yeah, it sounded like, well, first of all, it sounded like they had backup generator, like maybe levees in place in case something like that were to happen, because the games only malfunctioned for a moment before they were basically back up.
Right.
But Haymitch also ended up realizing that more damage was done than they thought, because there's that moment when two of the career tributes are chasing him and Maisley, and they come across the peacekeepers that are trying to fix. And
somebody's like mopping or something.
Yeah, they're like the cleanup crew.
During the game, you have to do this now. And listen, I'm an freak, I understand. But like, what do they do? Like, they have to keep it going. Like, what?
That was wild to me.
Yeah,
and you knew like as soon as you saw these Capitol employees out
the
there,
short straw.
They were dead though. They were going to be attacked.
Yeah.
Like I just felt bad for those people.
I know.
Yeah. So I guess it is that like the underground is probably entirely flooded. Like they did do what he probably disabled a lot of systems that would have been used to kill everyone. Like maybe some of the mutts, like more of the mutts were disabled, more of the environmental controls. Like, so, I mean, the volcano goes right after that. Well, volcano in quotes, nothing is as it seems, but yeah, I get this. So talking about it has helped for sure to figure out kind of what the scope is of Haymitch's success with that. But it's what I liked about his time in the games as it was coming to a close is, you know, as he was recruiting his friends to go north, he wasn't able to give away the game and explain what he was doing. And so having to watch him struggle to kind of convince his allies to go with him without tipping his hand to the Capitol was actually a pretty exciting, intense kind of moment. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
So after the games, Haymitch has a recovery period, and then he's forced to stick around the Capitol while they parade him around to all these victory parties, which is just awful. But before he finally is allowed to go home to District 12, President Snow chillingly tells him to enjoy his homecoming. And this is kind of the beginning of the end. I thought that this was an interesting callback to kind of the beginning of the book. There's an altercation between Maisley and Drusilla, who's the escort for the District 12 tributes. And Maisley basically says that, like, if she wins, she'll always be more famous than Drusilla, no matter if she wins or not. And Drusilla says like something like, I hope you do win because you have no idea what's coming to you if you do. And I thought that this was such an interesting targeted threat because, first of all, nobody really knows what happens after you win. And I think that all that is assumed is that you get to go live in the victor's village. But the reality is that I think Haymitch says it best. He says there's no winners, there are only survivors. And he says this to Katniss later on.
Yeah, we know from the parts of Finnick's story that we do have, and we do have quite a bit of Finnick, probably as much, if not more, as we do of Haymitch. But with Finnick's story, you realize that as a victor, you're still the property of the capital. You are always the property of the capital, and you are not free. You're never going to be free again.
And just the mental and physical abuse and trauma that you're experiencing before, during, and after the games you'll be stuck with for the rest of your life. Do we see the capital give these people therapy? No. Is that in the Victor's Village?
We only read book series that don't have good mental health services. I'll tell you that.
Right. So I think that's what they also mean when they say, are you really a winner? Are you really in the clear? No.
Yeah. So Haymitch's punishment starts basically as soon as he arrives back at District 12, and his house is burning down before his eyes, and his mother and brother both perish in this fire, which is just awful.
Yeah, and Haymitch also blames himself because he hadn't refilled his family's water source prior to heading into the games, and he left it to Sid to do, his brother. And, I thought it was interesting that this thought crosses Haymitch's mind, because of course he's going to try to blame himself, and naturally that's what you might do when you've been through this type of situation. Yeah. But really, it was not his fault. It was the capital's effing fault.
Yeah, there's no saying. I mean, if they used an accelerant, there's no saying what would or wouldn't have quelled it. And in the meantime, your family's burning alive on the other side, so there's not really
awful
nothing you could do.
Yeah,
but I didn't think they could top that evil until I saw what happens then when Haymitch goes to meet up with Lenore Dove.
Yeah, do you want to talk a little more about that?
Yeah, so there's this thing where he'd given Sid, Haymitch, before he went into the games, gave Sid a bag of candy from the sweet shop that Maisie worked at, and it's to give to Lenore Dove. And when Haymitch returns to her, she's been imprisoned during the games for general speaking out and things, but she's been returned to him, and we think they're going to have this wonderful reunion. Haymitch goes to, it's that spot outside the district where she has her geese, and we see her pick up a bag of sweets, and we assume, she's got the bag that he gave her. Until she has one. They do go to each other's arms. I like that she was able to see him, he was able to see her, and they ran into each other's arms and had like a couple of seconds of niceness before it's realized that this is actually a poisoned bag with the Candy Sweet Shop logo on it. So it's totally insidious on the part of Snow. Like, he made it an authentic fake. Yeah. But just like in the arena, it's not safe to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just awful.
It was tragic.
Right, his arms.
Yeah, you would think killing Haymitch's mother and brother would be enough, but no, Snow has to go all the way. Snow lands on top, and and he wants to make sure the closest people in his life are gone for good. He is not allowed to be happy. He is not a winner because you effed with the capital.
Right. It reminded me of what Joanna tells Katniss in Catching Fire. She says the capital can't hurt her because there's no one left that she loves.
Ooh.
And I mean, like, that's another character that I would love to read more about, another fan favorite. But yeah, it's like I think that she carries her grief in a completely different way than Haymitch does. But I do wonder now, in relation to this, if they're more parallels to their stories than maybe we know. So
it's a pretty good point.
Yeah. So shortly after this, Haymitch turns to the bottle, has kind of resigned himself to this fate of having to live a life alone, so that nobody else he loves can suffer at the hands of Snow or the capital. And the only thing basically he has left to quote unquote look forward to is that every year on his birthday, he gets to send a new pair of District 12 tributes to their death. So it seems pretty bleak until we get to this beautiful epilogue.
But can I
Yeah.
say, before we get to that, being forced out once a year to coach a new pair of tributes, he has to relive his trauma
That's
year
exactly
after
it.
year for the rest of his
escape.
life.
The games
Right.
never end.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to add is there was too much of the Raven at the end of this book. I liked that she was trying to tie it together, the poem "The Raven" by Edgar Allan Poe, but it was a little too much for me. I found myself starting to skip over some of these excerpts.
I think it reads better in the audiobook.
Okay.
Because
I'm
he's
sure it
going
does.
mad, kind of, and that's like his only way to comfort. But I get what you're saying, because it is like these huge swaths of quotations.
I think it's bold. You have to be like, it's a bold move to even try that. And I was a little skeptical, but reading it, I'm like, okay, this succeeds, but only just because I'm not really in a full.
This
English
must be
majors.
the Raven. Must be, what is it called? Like, not common. Like the copyright must be.
Oh yeah,
fair use.
Yeah, public domain.
Public domain, thank you.
Suzanne's like, there you go, yeah. Suzanne's like, how can I save a buck while writing this book?
Well, no, it was
public
clever. And I mean, this is a relationship between Haymitch and Snow. Like, Snow talks about how the Covey names their people. And so it's kind of chilling that he knows this about the Covey, and Haymitch doesn't understand why. But again, back to, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And I did ultimately love the closure we do get about Lucy Gray Baird as well. We don't know sort of how she lived her life, but we do know where she does end up, and it's by like Lenore's grave. And really just the way in which Haymitch comes across Lenore's grave, and this epilogue that is now taking place once, Katniss and Peter are in the picture, and sort of post Mockingjay. It's a really beautiful section of the book. I found myself not wanting it to end, and I was surprised because it went on a lot longer than I was expecting.
Yeah, I loved the ending despite my little complaint there. And after reading and sitting with it for a while, I have been like really, really impressed with this book increasingly the more I sit with it.
I love that.
Yeah. And we didn't mention it. There's obviously we could talk about this book forever, but Haymitch is very good friends with Katniss's dad, Burdock, who we only know in passing because he's already passed by the time we meet Katniss. And we also get a glimpse of Astrid, her mother, who seems to be friends with Maisie. I think they embrace when Maisie gets raped as well, because she's a town girl. So It's just like the tie-ins are beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And they both try their best to patch Haymitch up until he forces them to stop.
And the tie-ins continue with the epilogue, right?
Yeah. I mean, we've already alluded to this a little bit, but yeah, the epilogue is just lovely. And he also talks about like seeing Katniss for the first time and how proud her dad was to parade her around, and how like he basically like knew from the moment that he called her sweetheart that, that was it. And it's just the fact that he's able to find family in the end, even though he thinks that that's the one thing he'll never have, and that ends up giving him peace, is such a nice way to tie up his story.
I was blown away.
Katniss reminds him of Luella was really touching.
Yeah. And she brings him geese.
PETA makes her an incubator.
He finally tells him about everybody that he's lost.
Oh,
yes.
Just the floodgates open.
And it gets included in Katniss and PETA's memory book, which I believe in the epilogue, Haymitch refers to it as a history book. They're history books. I was a little confused at first, but yeah, that was a cool tie-in, the geese tie-in. My hat is off to Suzanne Collins. Just big fan of how this turned out.
I keep going back to what you were saying about how it would be cool if she did a short story book. I feel like marketing it as like Katniss and PETA's memory book and having all these smaller stories would be such a smart move.
Yeah, Mags contributed something to it if she was able. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like, that's basically Sunrise on the Reaping. Did anybody want to just really quickly shout out any like favorites or standout moments that we didn't get to? Rapid fire style.
Everything, but in terms of favorite characters, I would say I loved Plutarch and BT simply because of this double agent angle, particularly from Plutarch. So following that was cool and getting that additional character development and that backstory.
Yeah, I love Beatty. I really love Jeffrey Wright as Beatty in the movie too. So I don't know what this means for an eventual movie. Obviously, this is the character 25 years earlier, but seeing the way that he is mentally preparing for the death of his son, because it's all but an assured thing. This idea that he himself is too valuable for the Capitol to kill, but not to punish, is definitely a through line of the entire book. So it's kind of unexpectedly rested on Beatty. So I really loved that and was just very, very pleased with the book.
Same.
Give us more, Suzanne Collins.
Give us, please.
Are we on a 5-year cadence now? That seems to be the cadence for the first 2 prequels. So I think, we don't have exact sales numbers yet, but this book does seem to be doing really well, is very well reviewed on Amazon so far. And
we have a movie to look forward to.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that movie now. Too. Apparently out next year.
Yeah. Well, that's the hype on Sunrise on the Reaping. And we appreciate you all so much for joining us for our little recap discussion here. Hopefully we were able to talk about some of your favorite moments or characters as a result of all of this. Before we wrap things up, we wanted to give you all a few reminders. Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review. We want to know what you think about the show, but also it really helps us get the word out about the show since we are a small operation. So we really appreciate you all if you support us in that way. Also, be sure to follow us on social media. We're What the Hype podcast on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitch. And we are What the Hype Show on X. Our website is whatthehypepodcast.com. And if you want to email us about anything, you can do that at whatthehypepodcast@gmail.com. And if you have a friend or family member in your life who's just finished the book or is a Hunger Games fan, don't forget to link them to our little Hunger Games trilogy of episodes that we just wrapped up today. And we hope that you all enjoy joining us for future episodes. We're talking about a new aspect of pop culture every week.
And that's how you summarize and analyze a book in an hour.
Nice
Bye,
job,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.
Bye, sweethearts.